Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Yunus, verse 1057, part 2, Quranic Cognitive Therapy versus CBT. CBT here stands for Cognitive Behavior Therapy. As we said at the end of last presentation, that I'll be looking at some wider aspects of this verse 1057, and we will try to see that what kind of psychological, should we say, uh, perspective the Quran provides us. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is any question or query regarding this presentation. And verse 1057, the Quran has the recipe for the ailments of the human heart. Ya ayyuhan nasu qad ja'atkum maw'izatun min rabbikum wa shifaa'un lima fis sudur wa hudan wa rahmatul lil mu'minin. This is that law, O mankind, which has come towards you from the direction of your Rabb in the form of this code of guidance. In this there is treatment for every dissonance of yours which keeps your heart in anxiety. So Quran has given this, mentioned this in this verse, that it provides treatment, it provides the recipe for those issues which arise in human heart and create internal conflicts. And of course, once we have internal conflicts within ourselves, then we will also display them in the outer world, which guides every one of those nations, which accepts it as their code of life towards the path of successes and benefits them with the means of nourishment. So over here, what Quran has done is that from addressing mankind, Ya Ayyuhan Nasu, then it goes on to Hudam wa Rahmatul lil Momineen, that it is a guidance and a Rahmat. And we know Rahmat has a very wide connotations, which includes development, nourishment, and even means of sustenance. And then it says that then you become Momineen. And that's a big transition from mankind to becoming Momineen. Further reflections on verse 1057. As we know, the Quran provides us with the choice of an alternative system called Deen, which helps to eliminate all those psychological issues which we see being created around us in man-device systems. In this verse, Allah has declared for the attention of mankind for all times that in this Quran is the recipe for treatment of the issues of the heart. And this needed exploration, and that is why I thought we should go into further details and look at it. Those issues which the man-device systems create. Then it states that it serves as a guidance for those who choose to follow its path, and that they then benefit from its process of nourishment. Today, we will look at some basic points of cognitive behavior therapy and also person-centered therapy put forward by Carl Rogers. I selected these two because I thought that these give us some glimpse of what is going on in the human world and how do human beings approach the problems created by the psychological problems created by the system or for human beings within the environment in which they live. And then we look at it, that how the Quran is asking us to deal with these issues. So it will give us a broader perspective to what the Quran is asking us to change within our own selves. These will provide a brief overview of human thinking, feeling, and understanding when dealing with human cognitive problems at the fundamental level of being human. So it's not prescriptive in any way. The choice is ours, but at least as the students of the Quran, we can see that what are the human efforts in this field and how they are dealing with this. And that gives us a slightly broader perspective when we come to the Quran. This will also make us aware of the kinds of issues we may have to deal with even in the system of Deen. Because ultimately, as and when the system of Deen is established, we will also be facing these issues. Because at least at the transitional level, when we will be going from the man-device system towards Deen, human beings who will be entering into that system will also have these kind of issues in some part of the society. So at least we will have some idea that how man-device systems, those deal with the human problems. To become aware of an issue is the first step towards dealing with any issue facing us in our earthly life. Towards the end, we will look at some verses and a simple recipe of the Quran to deal with the complex psychological issues created by the man-device systems. Now, let us look at some salient aspects of cognitive behavior therapy. This is just an introduction. For further details, we can always Google and or read some books. There is a book which I have referred as well in this presentation. Some fundamentals. The fundamental principle of CBT is that the way people think in a specific situation will affect how they feel emotionally and physically, and also alters their behavior. Cognitive behavior therapy means that people have certain issues psychologically, and how do we deal with them? So that they can change their behavior, and as a consequence of change in their behavior, they can change their thinking and feelings. In depression and anxiety, people tend to think in more extreme and unhelpful ways. They may focus on negative self-concepts, such as viewing themselves as worthless, a failure, or vulnerable to danger. And we know that when we are faced with difficulties, people do feel a bit down. They also might feel frustrated, they feel stressed, and its extreme form is then depression. Behavior also alters, perhaps by reducing activity or avoiding certain situations. People may develop new unhelpful behaviors such as excessive drinking, self-harming, or repeated reassurance seeking. And even people in extreme cases commit suicide. This exacerbates emotional distress in the form of a vicious circle. CBT teaches patients to identify unhelpful patterns of thinking and behavior and to develop new, more helpful thoughts and reactions. It's not trying to eliminate emotional responses altogether. It does not mean that we get rid of the emotions, our own thinking process, but it is to alter it. Appropriate emotion is a normal, healthy, and necessary response to life-changing situations. And we know emotions are required to get things done. We have to stay motivated. And that is the aspect we should keep it in mind as we are going through this presentation. However, certain responses, particularly if repetitive, may start to form unhelpful negative patterns. The key is to identify how thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are interacting in any one individual at any time in order to make informed choices about helpful ways to move forwards. So if I can identify the relationship between my thoughts, feelings, and behavior, then of course I can understand it in others as well. And this is I have taken it from this book, CBT and General Practice by Lee David. CBT, relationship between thoughts and feelings. There is a reciprocal relationship between thoughts and feelings. In other words, thinking negatively is likely to make people feel bad, and feeling low will also make people think more negatively. The more intensely we experience a particular emotion, the more extreme the associated thinking is likely to be. And over here, I've quoted this chart. On the left is thought and the possible feelings. For example, what if I give a terrible speech to my colleagues? It might go down like a lead balloon and they will think I am incompetent. With that kind of a negative feeling, it will give rise to anxiety and fear. Then the thought is, I am worthless, no one wants me. And this will lead to depression and sadness. So of course, if we want to avoid depression and sadness, then we should not feel worthless. It is easier said than done. So this is where the CBT comes in, where through psychotherapy, those patients are encouraged to think more positively. My son failed to get to university. It's all my fault. I am a bad parent. And over here, we develop guilt. I always do my best for him. Why doesn't he do this best for me? And this is a very common type of a behavior where we expect something from others when we do a favor to them, and this causes hurt. He shouldn't interrupt me. He's thoughtless. And over here, we get anger. We have anger which emerges. These are some of the points which the book has mentioned, but we can see that feelings can be more than one. Separating thoughts and feelings can make complex reactions seem more understandable. So if we are aware of our thoughts and the feelings which are emerging, then essentially we have some knowledge of it, that what is going on. But in case we do not, then the situation becomes a bit more complex. Altering the negative thoughts and behaviors that underlie negative feelings can improve mood. Next slide is CBT, the issue of evaluation of thoughts and thinking styles, the cognitive element of CBT. The chart illustrates that how people feel and behave in a particular situation is likely to correspond to their individual thoughts and beliefs. The chart which we have seen in the previous slide, we can always develop our own mental chart even by looking at our own behavior, our own thought process, and the reactions we get, because then we are at a higher level of self-consciousness. These will vary from person to person. On different occasions, the same individual may also react differently, perhaps depending on their mood or on other circumstances and life events. Any of these responses may be appropriate in different circumstances. Next point is, but when people suffer from emotional disorders, they often react negatively to nearly every situation that they encounter. And we do come across people who, because of their own perspective to life or because of their own particular set of circumstances, they are very negative. And this prompts us, those who are in a better position, to try to analyze it. This results in a persistently anxious or depressed mood, which is further maintained by unhelpful behavior patterns as a vicious cycle. And we will look at this vicious cycle slightly later. Thoughts are words and visual images that pass through people's minds. The term encompasses a variety of processes, including attitudes, ideas, expectations, memories, beliefs, and images. Because all of us, for example, as parents, we deal with children, we deal with our family as well, with our friends, with our colleagues. So all these things are helpful in understanding that how the human thinking works. Automatic thoughts are instantaneous, unplanned thoughts which flow through our minds throughout the day in response to events, and we experience these. Negative automatic thoughts, which assume the worst in any given situation, are common in disorders such as depression and anxiety. So this is important, that these negative automatic thoughts are the ones which create issues. Next is CBT, different perspectives for the same situation. It is important to separate people's internal reactions from the external situations that have triggered a particular response. Whilst people commonly assume that anyone would feel the same as me in this situation, in reality, a wide variety of individual reactions can occur in response to the same situation. Different relative values decide the outcome. Now, this in bracket, this is my addition here in the light of the Quran, that it is our values which actually decide how do we react. Now, over here, I've quoted this chart. First column is of event. A friend is an hour late for dinner. Some lady has invited her friend to a dinner, and this is in relation to that. Event, thought, how dare she do this to me? She is so inconsiderate and rude. For example, she is coming late, and the thought which appeared in her mind is this one, the first one. Second is, and this will cause anger. Second is, she probably didn't want to come because she doesn't really like me, and this will cause depression. What if she had an accident? She could be seriously hurt. This is the third form of thought. And over here, it will cause anxiety. I expect she's stuck in traffic. At least I have extra time to prepare dinner, and she's relieved. So there are 4 different scenarios quoted here, and all these thoughts can come to some individual, and we should be able to recognize those thoughts. And of course, there is instruction over here as well, that what kind of a thoughts we should let go, and which kind of a thoughts we should eliminate. Possible behavior of all these 4 thoughts is tell her off or be unfriendly when she arrives. That is the first thought, that you are having a negative thought that she's very inconsiderate and rude, without looking at the reason or the cause for her being late. Second is withdraw from people and stop asking them over. And that is an extreme form of reaction that I will never invite anyone now onwards. Phone local hospitals. If one is concerned that she might have an accident, then one can take it a bit further. Of course, there should be a reason for that. Continue preparing dinner, and in fact, one feels relieved that I've got an extra hour. and I should prepare my dinner and maybe set the dining table and everything. So looking at it more positively. It all depends that how we view the things. CBT, continuing on thoughts, chains of thoughts. Thoughts rarely occur individually. One thought about a particular issue commonly leads to others in a cascade, and we all experience it in life. And when we experience it, then we should also understand that it is happening to others as well. People often experience an explosion of thoughts occurring in rapid succession. Such a cascade is often very rapid, occurring within a few seconds. Previous example, cascade of thoughts. First set is, my friend is late for dinner. She must have forgotten about the invitation. So this is the first set of thought. The first we thought that she's late for dinner and she must have forgotten. Whereas for the second thought, there is no reason for that. And even if the second thought has come, we should try to eliminate it. Second set of thought is, she probably had something more interesting or important to do. This must mean that she thinks I am boring. She probably doesn't really like me. That is the third set. No one seems to really care about me or make any effort for me. So it depends that what kind of a makeup we have, the psychological makeup we have, or what kind of circumstances or environment in which we are at that point in time. So all these things affect us. So the point over here is that, are we aware of them? The process of CBT teaches patients to view their thoughts as merely hypotheses or guesses to be tested against reality. It may not be possible to alter the immediate automatic thought that occurs in response to a particular event. However, patients can learn to identify and test out whether their automatic thoughts represent a realistic assessment of the situation, or whether another perspective may be more accurate and helpful. And this is important from being the Quranic students, that we should go into a very high level of self-consciousness and consciousness and awareness, where we understand what is going on within our own head and what possible is the situation with other people around us. CBT, making sense of feelings. In CBT terminology, feelings are viewed as emotions or moods, such as feeling happy, excited, angry, sad, frustrated, embarrassed, or fearful. Some of the common negative feelings include the following. Sadness and loss will cover feeling low, down, unhappy, depressed, miserable, sad, fed up, disappointed. So that means if we are aware of it, then we can deal with it. And if we are not aware of it, then essentially these feelings have taken over our cognition or ourself. Guilt and shame, ashamed, guilty, embarrassed, humiliated, mortified. Anxiety and fear, feeling nervous, tense, frightened, anxious, worried, afraid, scared, panicky, terrified, petrified. And the fourth set is anger and hurt, feeling annoyed, irritated, frustrated, cross, exasperated, angry, furious, mad, livid, infuriated, hurt. Next is monitoring the intensity of feelings. Usually shows that feelings fluctuate widely over a period of time. And this is interesting, that we should be aware of our own intensity of feelings and how do these vary. And because the first step is to recognize these feelings. And we have seen that there are a lot of these negative feelings. And this is a product of the man-device system. If we remember, Allah said right at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah that man will create fear and huzn. So that is how we should try to view it and analyze it. Now we can rate these feelings. Rating of feelings, it is often helpful to learn to relate the intensity of feelings on a scale from, say, 0 to 100, and the low to very high feelings. For example, 0 to 10 will be very low feelings, and 90 to 100 will be very high level of feelings. Can we apply this rating to our understanding of various aspects of the Quran? For example, each permanent value, we can rate that as well. And of course, to put a tangible figure helps us to understand the gravity of the situation. For example, even when we are dealing with children and who are at a higher age of understanding, we can always ask them that if you are feeling low, that how would you rate it from a scale of, let's say, 0 to 10. Now, next is cognitive behavioral model, CBM. early and other significant experiences, because whatever we experience in life will generate thoughts and feelings. Next is development of deep-seated beliefs about the self, others, and the world, known as core beliefs and rules for living. Next is occurrence of critical incidents, events which trigger problems. In a normal routine life, we may not be subjected to very hard feelings or difficult situations, but when things become a bit bad, unexpectedly particularly, then we are caught into some kind of uh, a cycle, a vicious cycle in which we might find ourselves trapped. For example, sudden death of someone who is very close to us, dear to us, can deplete our psychological resources. On that, we will look at slightly later. Specific problems, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and physical reactions interacting as a vicious cycle. Now, over here, there's a very interesting diagram which I have reproduced over here, vicious cycle. This is taken from the same book. Now, first thoughts come, and then these thoughts lead to feelings. And today there was a question on our forum whether feelings come first or thoughts come later. It doesn't make any difference because thoughts lead to feelings and feelings also produce thoughts. And from feelings, then we can have physical reactions, and from physical reactions, we can have a behavior. And then from that behavior, we have further thoughts. So it starts going in cycle, and these are also crossing each other. So the point over here is that we should be aware of it, that what are thoughts doing, what are our feelings, and we should try to evaluate our feelings and do not jump to making quick decisions or coming to some opinions which are not based on permanent values. So this is the point over here. Now, second, what I have done is I have selected a person-centered approach which was put forward by Carl Rogers, who was a very famous psychologist. In fact, I also did a course on counseling using this approach, and it's very interesting. And I will go through some salient points here. I smile as I think of the various labels I have given to this theme during the course of my career. This is from Carl Rogers. He first called it non-directional counseling. And non-directive counseling. Non-directive counseling means here is that not that the therapist, the person who is counseling the client, he should never be judgmental. Client-centered therapy, that is looking at the issue of the client, it's not about the therapist, it is about the client. Student-centered teaching, group-centered leadership. As the fields of application have grown in number and variety, the label person-centered approach seems most descriptive. The central hypothesis of this approach is the individual has within him or herself vast resources for self-understanding, for altering the self-concept, basic attitudes, and his or her self-directed behavior, and that these resources can be tapped if only a definable climate of facilitative psychological attitudes can be provided. What it means is that each one of us is a complete unit, and since we are a complete unit, we have within us those abilities to find out solutions to our own problems. Because the problems do not originate suddenly, these always have some kind of a cause, some kind of a reason behind it. And if it has, then individuals who have run into problems and cannot solve it themselves, then they need some external input, but not in terms of as a judgment or as some kind of accusation or trying to, but the whole issue is to let the individual himself figure it out, that how is he or she going to solve that issue. There are three conditions which constitute growth, and this is very important because what he says is that these three conditions have to be created by the therapist, by the individual who is trying to help this client. And that is the promoting climate, whether we are speaking of the relationship between therapist and client, parent and child. And this is important for us as parents, and of course for the children as well to understand, because the children of today are going to be parents of tomorrow. Leader and group, teacher and student, or administrator and staff. The conditions apply, in fact, in any situation in which the development of the person is a goal. And this is important because we remember Quran also wants that the nafs should be allowed to develop. The conditions should be created so that human beings, they flourish, they develop, so that not only this life of theirs here in this world is lived better, but they pass it on to the next life as well and develop further. These three conditions are summarized next. The first element has to do with genuineness, realness, or congruence. And we see it in our life as well, that even if two friends are dealing with each other, if there is a slight iota of doubt in one's mind that the other person is not genuine and is not real, or is just trying to fob me off or get rid of me, we will see that that trust, the mutual confidence breaks down. The more the therapist is him or herself in the relationship, putting up no professional front or personal facade, the greater is the likelihood that the client will change and grow in a constructive manner. So that means that the therapist should not impose on the other client that I am far more qualified than you, and these are my qualifications, and this is how much experience I have. It is not a question of trying to impress the client. The issue over here is that the client is the center of the issue, center of the challenge. The therapist makes himself transparent to the client. The client can see through what the therapist is in the relationship. The client experiences no holding back on the part of the therapist. Thus, there is a close matching or congruence. And this is important even when we are dealing with, for example, on the Quranic platform, that all of us have to be on the same frequency. It is not about each one of us. It is about the system of deen. It is about those yatim and miskeen who are looking for help from Allah. And that is how I view it, and that is how I think we should view it. The second attitude of importance in creating a climate for change is acceptance, caring, or prizing, unconditional positive response. It involves the therapist's willingness for the client to be whatever immediate feeling is going on: confusion, resentment, fear, anger, courage, love, or pride. It is a non-possessive caring. The therapist prizes the client in a total rather than a conditional way. So therapist has to view other individual as a complete human being and see that whatever is in him, the conditions should be created so that he can come out with the issue and not hold back anything. The third facilitative aspect of the relationship is empathetic understanding. And empathy over here is not only that the therapist should look at the client from client's perspective, he should also look at it from his own perspective, and more important is to look at it from client's perspective. This means that the therapist senses accurately the feelings and personal meanings that are being experienced by the client and communicates the understanding to the client. The therapist is so much inside the private world of the other that he or she can clarify not only the meanings of which the client is aware, but even those just below the level of awareness. This kind of sensitive, active listening is exceedingly rare in our lives. We think we listen, but rarely do we listen with real understanding, true empathy. Yet listening of this very special kind is one of the most potent forces for change. Now, if we look at these three aspects, and we will see that the Quran is dealing with us like that. If we see Allah is talking to us in the Quran as Momineen, as if He knows everything about us, and then telling us that this is what you are and this is what you can be. So that is the point. We should keep it in mind, and we will expand on that maybe later. My interest in psychotherapy has brought about in me an interest of every kind of helping relationship. The other, in this sense, may be one individual or a group. A helping relationship might be defined as one in which one of the participants intends that there should come about in one or both parties more appreciation of, more expression of, more functional use of the latent inner resources of the individual. So important is that the latent resources, the potentials which the client has, he or she should recognize those, and the client therapist should also recognize that and bring them out. And if we say this is the approach the Quran also uses, Allah all along is telling us that you have far more inside you than what you think you have. And this Quran will help you to bring out all those potentials which are meant to be coming out during this life of yours. This has raised in my mind the strong suspicion that the optimal helping relationship is the kind of relationship created by a person who is psychologically mature. Just see this statement and just think of the system of Deen. And this statement will be extremely helpful under the system of Deen to understand what we need to do for other human beings. Or to put it in another way, the degree to which I can create relationships which facilitate the growth of others as separate persons is a measure of the growth I have achieved myself. It would indicate that if I am interested in creating helping relationships, and that's very important, interested, that I should have a desire to create helping relationships. I have a fascinating lifetime job ahead of me, stretching and developing my potentialities in the direction of growth. If we are thoughtfully trying to understand our tasks as administrators, teachers, educational counselors, therapists, then we are working on the problem which will determine the future of this planet. And if we replace all this with the term Momineen, then the things will become applicable to us. For it is not upon the physical sciences that the future will depend. And very important statement here which Carl Rogers makes. It is upon us who are trying to understand and deal with the interactions between human beings who are trying to create helping relationships. Because it's all about relationships, irrespective of how much technology we have in the world. If we want a happier world, a world which is free from fear and huzn, then we have to have helping relationships. And this is taken from On Becoming a Person by Carl Rogers. Now, what I've done in this slide is I looked at it in the light of the Quran and I thought some salient limitations of CBT and the person-centered therapy stand out. First is both deal with the effects, not the causes of or the environment which produces these issues in the first place. The domain of the causes is left to the politicians and rulers, and those who conduct CBT and person-centered therapies only offer solutions and then send these human beings back to the same environment which created these problems in the first place. And this is important because the world which we have around us, it is creating some of these individuals who suffer and as a result are left out. If we remember, Quran has used the term yatim and miskeen for them. And because where human beings feel lonely, feel isolated, and then of course they feel worthless. And when a human being feels worthless, he is going to go down psychologically. These are non-judgmental approaches in which values do not come into play. For example, relative versus permanent values. The therapists or doctors themselves live life within relative values. So the issue over here is that the therapist or the doctor himself is working within the relative values. The patient is also the product of relative values. Then essentially, they are not taking the problem holistically. And it is very fragmented approach. And this point has to be kept in mind when we are coming to the Quran. Hopelessness leads to giving up, and our inner desire and motivation becomes hampered. This can be in response to external circumstances or our inner psyche or both. Children brought up in broken homes and families face these kinds of issues more often. This also happens within slums and poverty-stricken areas, where people just accept their condition as a fait accompli. The Quran refers to this state of affairs in many verses. And we can see that, for example, where there are inherently classes built into the religious system, then a child born in the lower class will all his life or her life will think that he is meant to stay in that class. So these are psychological limitations which are imposed by man-made systems. We have seen that the man-devised systems mostly address those issues where the people at the top feel threatened or it suits them politically. With the world now being divided intrinsically into nation states, which it should not be, the divided world has become a reality. This unnatural division, not meant to be, is a dissonance at a fundamental level. The human self is a whole, and asking it to divide itself will lead to deep psychological issues. So I have taken a slightly broader perspective, and I said that we have a machine, we have a factory set up to create psychological problems. And in many ways, we are lucky that we don't have that many problems, apparently. But if we look at human beings and we talk to them intimately, we will find that, and using the Quranic lens, we will find that how many problems they have, which they should not have. They should be free from all those chains, which the Quran says that we are meant to remove them. Individuals find themselves in these mental states due to events and circumstances in their life, and unless these are changed, a mere change in thinking will not lead to a positive outcome. Those who come out of it change the environment in which they live. However, external intervention in terms of help is required. More information is not of much help. It does not mean that these CBT and person-centered therapies are not useful. These are useful, of course. But the thing is that we, being the students of the Quran, look at the wider picture, broader picture, and keep the system of deen in our mind. That why should human beings suffer while there is an outline, there is a map and a blueprint given for a system in the Quran. So that is the whole issue before us. Further reflection on CBT and person-centered therapy. The therapist avoids confronting people with the cause of their ailments, and since they themselves are not fully convinced about the functioning of the law of requital, or due to professional constraints, they do not let people know about the seriousness of human existence. And this is a situation in the West, particularly where the therapist is not supposed to be judgmental, even if he or she knows that the client has these problems because of the way he or she is thinking, or because of certain set of circumstances which he or she is not willing to change. And if we do not change the circumstances or the environment which produce those effects on our mind, then how are we going to get out of it? The clients are living life thinking it will end with death or become hopeless. And that is what Iblis says, that their problems cannot be solved, and this condition cannot be countered by those who themselves are suffering from this, maybe unwittingly. And a lot of clients, the people feel that they have wasted a lot of their life because of the faults of others. They accuse others. And this is where the Quran helps. The Quran says, no, you can start your life with a clean slate at any point in time, as long as you are not terminally ill. And death poses a huge threat to each one of us. And if we think on that, and if we think in the light of the Quran, then Quran gives us a different perspective to life. With the free availability of alcohol and even of drugs, many resort to this recipe to forget, at least temporarily. This is essentially an escape from the reality of our existence as human beings. When human beings avoid confronting the issues of life, they end up creating more. This is part of the functioning of the law of requital. Both these approaches do recognize the existence of the self, but not the way in which the Quran explains reality. Because this self, they say, is the product of the human mind, and as a result, when brain dead, this self dies. Whereas Quranic perspective is that the self is independent of our mind and brain. In fact, the self is the one which is using our brain and mind and our emotions and desires to get things done. It is based on the concept of personality or sense of being as detailed in modern psychology. This concept is based on the assumption that there is nothing within us which can go beyond physical death. Hence, one is in a state of continuous struggle to get the maximum out of this life before death, i.e., short-term personal gratification goals. That is why a lot of people will say, this is one life, or I had a time of my life. And these kind of outlook create problems for our psychology, because we are not looking at the picture or our life's pattern objectively. We are very much subjectively looking at it, that life is going to end with death. This creates hopelessness and meaninglessness of one's existence if one does not have adequate means to live this life. And this leads to our next slide, psychological resources. Psychological resource equation. I had created this equation sometimes back when I was reading through a paper on psychological resource. And what it says is that each one of us at any point in time have certain set of psychological resources. And some of these psychological resources cannot be changed, some can be changed. And over here, what I've done is I've divided into three parts. And over here, I psychology, this is the resource, for example, I have. And then there is the constant over here for the equation. It's a linear equation. Belief is the one which we will say iman or faith or whatever our conviction is or our outlook is. And within that, there's a job which I can change. Family is more or less we are stuck with it. Opportunities we can change. Problems we can select which problems we want to live with or which problems we do not. Language, again, we can change language, and of course, we expand the horizon of our thinking as well. Power, it is all again relevant, and health. Health is also to some extent within our control. Next one is which we cannot change, birth, where we are born, our parents, and those kind of things we cannot change. If I am born with a certain inherent disability, then I might have to live with it. Country, again, this is a man-made system, but still country is the one which we don't choose. Aging, we are going to age, whether we like it or don't like it. Gender, whatever gender we are born with, of course, in today's environment, this is, people are putting a question mark here as well. Color, with whatever color we are born. Death is a fact of life, we are going to die. And whatever past experiences we have at any point in time, we have to live with them. So these are more or less what I've done is, as for my own thinking, I put down these aspects which I think we may not be able to change. And then there are partial things, emotions, we can handle them if we know what kind of emotions we have. Intellect, again, we can increase or decrease, particularly we can increase, as the Quran puts a lot of emphasis on enhancing our intellect. Friends, this is our choice, whom we want to be friendly with and with whom we do not want to have any relationship. Wealth, again, it depends. If we have a more wealth, we can always share it with others, or we can keep multiplying it by using the modern techniques of business. Thinking, aim in life, this again can be enhanced. And memory as well, we can increase it by putting more things and consigning it to memory. So these are the three parts of our psychological resources. Now, at any point in time, what are our net psychological resources will depend on what resources we have and how much grief we are stuck with. For example, if somebody very close to our family dies, parents, for example, or a child dies, then we will go into a negative state in case our psychological resources over here are not enough and strong. But if we have enough of those, then we will not go into negative or into deficit. So that is the point I'm trying to make over here. And that was the point which was discussed in that paper as well. I'm forgetting the paper, but and the equation was not given there. This equation is created by myself. So the point over here is that we should enhance our psychological resource. And the point which I'm trying to make is that if our iman in Allah, as per the Quran, is there, then essentially we have infinite resource. Because we know life will not end with death, and whatever grievances and other things come in this world, these are because of the man-devised system. If there's a system of deen, then we will have a far higher level of psychological resource. And this is over here, there's some of the explanations. We can have a look in our own time. Few more aspects related to diseases of the heart. First is not being fully convinced of the truth of the Quran, and as a consequence, sowing seeds of doubt in own hearts and then passing on to others in order to gain their support. We should remain on guard of this, that others will try to discourage us, and we also don't do this. Because any expression of negativity can create bad impact on us as well as on others. The Quran declares hypocrisy to be a disease of the heart, and human beings wish to have support for their cause in life. And as hypocrites do not have firm iman, they have their own doubts and zan, they deliberately try to cause dissension among Momineen as part of a plan. Next point is the Quran advises us not to live life with doubts and under zan, as this leads to psychological issues which prevent us from getting optimum benefit from our earthly existence. It then tells us that do not think that these diseases of the heart will not increase. Indeed, these multiply with the passage of time if these are not treated in time. And we will see that the people who are on the wrong path, then, and particularly in position of power, they keep making more mistakes as the time passes. And as a result, the seeds of decline are within what they do. The Quran provides the means of protection against these diseases of the heart so that we do not end up getting infected with them in the first place. However, it does provide guidance to become aware of them and then helps to deal with them effectively. One of the fears with which we suffer in man-device system is the issue of injustice. For example, in a grossly unjust human system, we avoid giving evidence because it can go against us if the powerful can buy favors from the law. The Quran assures us of an absolute justice in the domain of Allah and asks Momineen to establish deen on these lines. Momineen are the only ones who can establish such a system which leads to minimizing psychological disorders of all kinds. Others simply cannot do this because they do not have full grasp of the whole issue, and that is their problem. In fact, they create systems which give rise to these issues, for example, fear and grief, as it helps to control the masses. In a man-device system, matters ultimately deteriorate to such an extent that evil flies far and wide. And Quran has cautioned us in other verses as well that be aware of it. Don't think that you will escape the effects of a bad system, because it will also affect you as and when the things become very bad. And that is why Quran says, forbid evil and promote good. The Quranic approach to solving human problems is based on facts and evidence. The Quran takes a direct, pragmatic approach in addressing human problems. For example, firstly, it states to man that the whole of its message is for his own eminence, and to raise the level of his awareness with a view to understanding some fundamentals of his creation as a human being. Since he has a self which provides him with choice and intent, and he does not have inner guidance, hence he has a choice to either follow his unbridled desires or to follow his desires by bringing these within the domain of the permanent values of the Quran. Because the addressee of the Quran is man. Each one of us is the addressee of the Quran. And Quran is from the creator, that is Allah. So we are the most important creation as far as this world is concerned. And that is how we should take it, because our intrinsic value is placed before us that I am the most important addressee to which the Quran is asking to raise his own eminence and loftiness. Then it makes it clear to him that the law of requital functions in his life, which ensures that all his deeds are accountable and leave their impact on his self, and it is verifiable through evidence. By virtue of possessing a self, the Quran tells man that he requires the higher self of Allah as a model to live his life, the concept of which is given in the book. We have gone over this aspect some number of times before as well. This concept, together with the certainty of the life of the hereafter, forms the foundation of the conviction called Iman. It then tells man that Iman so acquired is not otherworldly, but will bring about a tangible change within his outlook and vision, which can be checked through the signs noted in the Quran. To conclude, it states that follow up your Iman with solid deeds, and the whole of the guidance of the Quran will start to appeal to your newly acquired self, which will develop the capacity to grow and encompass the reality of its own creation, eminence, and significance. Because the Quran is essentially preparing us to solve the problems of humanity. And it is making the human psychology, a human psyche, very crystal clear before our eyes. Is telling us right at the fundamental level that what kind of a problems we are going to face under the system of being and in man-device systems. Procedure to seeking protection and growth explained. Now over here, what I've done is I've quoted 3 verses because Quran is telling us that there is nothing in the world which we do as a crime even, which cannot be overlooked or for which there is no solution. And that is important before coming to the Quran. So if we come to the Quran at any point in time, then whatever we have done in the past, that is taken care of. And this is an important, and it's a great point of satisfaction and assurance for us. I will go through the meanings. Hence, those people who by disobeying our law have done wrong to themselves, say to them that there is no need for them to become despondent. Those circumstances of theirs which have deteriorated due to going against our laws, they can be rectified again following our law. This law is such that by obeying it, the harms caused by former mistakes become rectified and further means of nourishment also become available. From this, protection from destructive elements and opportunities for self-development both become available. And these are explained in the Quran as we know it. Therefore, return to the law of Allah and bow down before it, but do not delay in this, because once the period of respite has ended and the time for outcomes arrives, then there will be no one to save you from this destruction. Therefore, before this destruction arrives, all of a sudden, before you, while you have no inkling of it, obey this code of Allah, obey it in such a way that in whatever matter comes before you, you see exactly which instruction applies to it, then act in accordance with it. Why Iman and Saleh deeds? Simple recipe to understand and follow. Again, I'll not go through the verse, I'll go through the meanings. Remember, in this regard, our law is this, that whoever among you, by having Iman in the truth of the system of Allah, will do such deeds which reform himself and the society, then we will make him live a very pleasant life. This will be a consequence of those deeds of theirs which will manifest in a balanced way from them. So over here, Quran has in fact mentioned both man and woman, Zakarim wa Unsa, Zakarim wa Unsa wa huwa Momineen, and says that they will have that they will have a very smooth life, a very life which will be full of pleasures, and they will understand the way life is. And this is true even within the man-made systems, that we understand the limitations of the man-made systems, and then we keep working towards the system of Deen. And I'll go through the meanings again for the second verse as well, which is more or less like the first one. Contrary to this, the person who keeps Iman in the truths of the law of Allah and is acting on the ability-enhancing program of his, because Quran gives us the whole program for self-development, from individual to a collective system. Whether a man or a woman, such people will be benefited with the bounties of life, and not an iota of decrease will be made in the outcome of their work. Doing this will be injustice, and Allah does not do injustice to anyone. We have gone through this aspect that Allah does not do zulm, does not do injustice to people. It is people who do injustice to themselves. Defining a very high order of acquired consciousness. Now, over here, I've quoted this verse. We have gone through it previously as well, but today what I've done is I have looked at it slightly differently. This is the 177th verse of Surah Al-Baqarah, and I'll go through the meanings. It is not bir, and bir means breadth of vision, and it is opposite of itham. Itham is something which weakens us, whereas bir is something which keeps strengthening us. It is not bir to face east or west. Bir is to have Iman in Allah, the fact that human life continues in the hereafter, in Malaika, in the books, in the Anbiya. If this is acquired, then as a consequence. And over here, this is what Iman means, that we should have Iman in Allah, in the fact that the life continues beyond into the hereafter, and in the forces of nature, in Allah's books, and in Anbiya. And after this, despite having affection for wealth, we share it willingly and happily by recognizing the state of the man-devised systems with those who are created by man-made systems. I've not gone through the individual details of it, but the whole point is that whatever we have, we learn to share it with others by recognizing the weaknesses of the man-devised systems. Then reaching this conclusion that there is a need to establish the system of salat and of organizing the process of zakat. And then making commitment for this system with Allah. And this is important, that this Iman over here, which Quran says, Man amana billahi, should lead to making a commitment. Because now we are on a different path of life. Our self has gone into that mode where it knows it is not going to die, and it is going to go beyond death, physical death, into a new life. Go through all hardships together with never to think of giving it up, and then is thus prove to own selves the truth of own commitment and acquire very high fidelity and self-development for the system of Deen. And we have gone through these things previously as well, so it is just to reiterate it with a view to dealing with these psychological issues. Deen makes human life simple and free from fear and huzn. And over here, I've quoted two verses and I'll go through the meanings. In this society, there will be no vain discourse, no kind of aimless noise or meaningless activism. And this is the characteristics of the system of Deen. And we can create it within our own imagination, within our own psyche. In this, every matter will be the means for the accomplishment of the development of the human self and will be a cause for the peace and security of humanity. And everyone will keep receiving the means of nourishment continuously and unceasingly. This is that Jannat whose heir we make from among our servants who by taking care of our laws become protected from the ruins of life. Since we create this Jannat through our own efforts, so nobody can take it away from us. Now let us look at a schematic, two choices in life, hereafter or no hereafter, creating different realities. Now what I've done over here is I've drawn certain figures and underneath I put down some comments. Just note over here, there are two gears over here in this figure. Life ends with death. I don't need guidance. This is the only life I have. Hence, I must seek happiness as defined by the world in which I live. Secular mind is that kind of a thinking is of a secular mind. There is no God. Second thought is, though life ends with death, but as per my religion, there is a hereafter. If I can please my God through rituals, then due to his mercy, I can enter his heaven. Again, there is no effort involved over here. It is just a belief. All sins can be forgiven by him. Hence, I can live this life the way I like. So all responsibility is put on their version of God, that I don't have to do anything. I can keep committing sins and I will be forgiven, i.e., according to my desires. Next one is life does not end with death. I have a self which I recognize and which has the potentials to grow from its existent state. I seek guidance and I'm willing to follow the path if it appeals to me. So this kind of mentality, this kind of outlook can emerge from either of these or from any other version. But the issue is that one should be looking for guidance. Bring out the best. And then over here, what I've done is slightly different figure over here. The Quranic model of human self, divine attributes plus permanent values based on Iman and strengthened by solid deeds, advancing towards Deen with Allah's help. So this is a totally different outlook, but this outlook has to emerge from this. So that is the point we should keep it in mind, and it is our choice. Now, one verse needing a reflection, Lahum ma yasha'una fiha wala daina mazid. And there they will have all that they wish, and there will be more from the presence of Allah. And this is very important because our life in this world is full of desires. There was no point in having desires and not being able to fulfill these desires. And this is where the Quran helps us. And it says that if you follow a particular path which is defined by the Quran, then you have a far better chance of not only fulfilling your desires in this life, but the desires of the hereafter will also be fulfilled. And this is something which I thought to put it down as a feeler. Desires created within man-devised systems. I put down some here which I could figure out. All revolve around meeting physical needs and pleasures, all created with a finite time scale, no potential to go beyond physical death. And these examples are good health, money, status, car, house, family, power, fame, traveling, happiness, etc. And if we look at the verse 57:20, a lot is already covered in that verse. Others work and I benefit. And that is another mentality people develop, that others should work for me and I don't have to do any work. And that is the typical capitalist mentality. Need to be admired for doing nothing, not very keen on using intellect, blind, deaf, and dumb. This is what the Quran declares them. Wish this life continues forever because they have accumulated so much wealth. And I remember someone on BBC Two once said that how great it would have been if we had died first and then lived forever afterwards. And that was very interesting. Strong desire to prolong it, not to be held accountable for anything, desire to please God through rituals, desire for miracles. So over here, those who are in a position of power and those who accumulate wealth, then they want this state to continue. Some desires in relation to this life, which is Quran driven, bring your wishes in line with what Allah wishes. Aid Allah and He will help you. Strong desire to gain knowledge, desire to seek guidance, desire to be free from fear and huzn, to have Iman and do solid deeds with a view to become eligible for power, to be united with Momineen and hold on to the Quran, to free mankind from their chains. And that should also be our desire, that once we have got rid of our own chains, we should create a desire within us to help others to get rid of those chains. All supplications are wishes of Momineen, to be in the company of Salihin. Whatever is noted in the Quran in relation to the system of Deen, Jamaat-e-Momineen, are desires of Momineen. And over here, what I've done is I've thought through it. And from the Quran, I thought there are certain desires which we can formulate at our existing stage of existence. Desires in relation to the life of the hereafter, since entry into the hereafter is based on a developed self. So the assumption over here is that we are entering into the life of the hereafter with a developed self, and we have brought out maximum potentials within the means available to us in the man-made system, if the system of Deen is not yet established. Desire to manifest all those divine attributes which we were unable to manifest here due to absence of Deen, desire to have increase in light. And this is a beautiful verse of Surah Al-Hadid. We should go through it. To stay on Sirat al-Mustaqim, to have an eternal life, no more death. And Quran itself has said that you will not have another death, no more physical death. A gender-free life, understood the importance of living at self's level. This is, I figured it out, that we don't want to have any kind of a gender because the pleasure of living at self's level is multiplied. To meet up with all Momineen as noted in 469, to continue to discover the non-physical world in the universe, to continue on the path of expanding consciousness through creative activity. Because over here we have already expanded our consciousness, our self-awareness has gone more than what others have, those who are not following the Quran, and we would like it to keep expanding. This is that bir which Quran has mentioned in verse 177 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Now, this is another interesting schematic which I thought to share with you, expanding the horizon of our consciousness. Over here, there is an individual who is facing some problems with the head between his palms. Why do I face problems created by others? And then there is another human being who says, wait a minute, you have an answer. And could you explain it to me? And somebody from the Quranic background comes along and he says, you mean the Quran explains human issues in the context of Deen as a system? And then he says, got it. And then here is the book from Allah, which has a solution to the problems created by the unguided human psyche. Schematic step change by selecting the Quranic path. Now, what I've done over here is I've said that highway of human physical life, which is going on. This is the way world is moving from past to through the present into the future, heading towards the physical land. All those who continue to live without realizing their own intrinsic value are trapped in the vicious cycle of their thoughts, feelings, behavior, thoughts, feelings. As we saw in that figure, the conveyor belt of biological cycle continues unabated. Human beings suffer due to lack of guidance. So this conveyor belt of human man-device system is going to create problems of different magnitude, depending on the traps in which human beings find themselves. And we know that the Quran has the solution for all this. So cycle of rise and fall of nations is dependent on that, continues. Individual selves never reach their intended destination. Point at which someone comes towards the Quranic guidance, new life commences. So it doesn't matter whether this point is here or over here or over here. So at whatever point we enter the domain of the Quranic guidance, then we have essentially gone on to a different plane, a different spectrum, and started with a new self. Previous life becomes irrelevant in relation to the eternity in front. Because one of the things which we come across is that people say that, oh, I have lost a lot of life because of so and so or because of the circumstances. Over here, Quran says, don't worry, because this physical life is a tiny part of the life which is going to come. So if you develop yourself, you have essentially gained an eternity for yourself. So it is in your own hand, and Quran is here to help you. And if you work with Momineen, then of course it will start multiplying at a very high rate. While living in the same flow, life of the self becomes evidently clear. Intrinsic value provides high perspective. And we can differentiate the two lives, the life within the man-device systems and the life of ourself, which is following the Quranic values and Quranic understanding. Higher discernible self emerges, which gradually comes to terms with the reality of human existence. The meaning of Iman plus solid deeds expands, and the hereafter appears as a reality. And that is a massive, another step change will take place once we enter into the life of the hereafter. Now, finally, is human life meant to be complicated? In today's world, man-made systems have become very complex for people, and the reason for this is that due to relative values which keep changing, there is no well-defined immutable boundary line. While these keep becoming more complex, the human being at a fundamental level remains the same and will always remain the same. Because if human beings change, then there will be injustice. So in Allah's word, that is the word of human self, it remains the same, irrespective of whether we have all this AI and all kinds of gadgets and technology and weapons of mass destruction. It makes no difference. At a fundamental level, human beings will always remain the same, and their interaction, their relationships will always remain the same. As Carl Rogers said, happy relationships should be the aim of life. Two aspects of being human will never change: having a physical body with intellect, emotions, desires, and having a self with an I. These two create a unique combination to make choices and then to act on these choices to bring change in the world. Next is rich, powerful, middle class, lower class, very poor, all human beings die. Physical death is part of the fact of our existence. No matter how technologically and intellectually advanced we may become, our birth and death will always follow Allah's law. This is where we need to focus our attention in order to understand the importance of the guidance of the Quran. We need to devise a system of life which meets our physical needs adequately and burdens us minimally cognitively, and helps us to acquire a self which gets on the highway of self-development in this life, and then it acquires the ability to continue developing beyond our physical death. The blueprint for this system is outlined in the Quran, and we know it. Psychologically, this system is simple to understand in every respect, and during the process of education and training, self-development also keeps taking place. And thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of being.